Right, hi there people. So I'm just going to be going over my workflow since I've had some questions from people about how to apply Pivot Painter 2.0 to, well, megascans assets or your own personal assets. So what I'm going to be doing here is just taking a simple plant from megascans, taking it into Maya, showing how I separate it out to then take it into Max and apply Pivot Painter 2.0. This is due to me not really being very efficient in 3ds Max, so you can probably follow along and do exactly what I'm doing in Maya with Max anyway. Then I take the asset back into Maya and I transfer the UV sets down the chain so that everything follows in regards to the LODs, so you don't get weird artifacting and popping because the other LODs don't have the Pivot Painter 2.0 information applied and so would not be moving correctly, or as they should be. So first off, I'm going to go to Maya. I'm going to bring in the two LODs from the money plant, well, the four LODs rather. And remove them from the grouping, and then I will name these just so I can follow it easier for myself. This is I'll apply just a thong to all of these, and I'll apply one to the billboard as well. I'll call this, oh hang on a second, I believe I still have some data in this from my previous test. Shade, delete unused nodes. So money plant sub, and then I'll call money plant build sub. Now with that done, the next thing I'm going to do is to split out the geometry to have the pivot painter information applied. So you may well find this is in Max. I'm just asking my all this kind of stuff. Now what it will do is it follows like a chain, like a hierarchical chain to apply the pivot painter. Now for trees and things you'd have this would probably be called your trunk, and then you would have, say, this would be branch 01 as an example, and then you'd have various leaf sets coming off this, which would be called like leaf 01, leaf 0, or you probably call this branch A actually, then leaf A01, leaf A02, leaf A03 coming off of it in that chain. But we're just going to do a simple plant here. But that's just to kind of give you an idea of how to do larger, more complex objects. Although I may, if there's interest in this, I may well sort of go over and do some other more sort of complicated assets and simpler ones as well, like grass, because they're also done in a different way. Again, due to it all being hierarchical based, and grass is just going to be one coming off from a base, as it were. And I'll show you how I go about doing that in another video, I expect. So anyway, for this, what I'm going to do is combine each of the leaves. And again, like, can do this in Max, I'm sure, fast, but I'm just really too adept in 3ds Max other than for just applying the pivot painter information. Oh, the other thing to mention as well, with megascans, it does, when it splits geo for complicated shapes, this is really beneficial, not so much for an asset like this. It does retain the hierarchy as it was split, or built, I should say. So what they've done is they built the asset, and when they combined it, when you split it again, it will go back to how it was. So for complicated things, it's a big help in the sense you won't have to try and like fiddle around trying to find what should be attached to what. You can just do it in your outliner due to the way it will split back out, which will make life infinitely easier for you. So all the leaves combined, and delete the history from this. And instead of trunk, I'm going to call this, oh, that's fine, A01 underscore stem, and then I will place all the leaves back under the hierarchy of the And if I export this, SA1. And again, you can follow along with this asset, which I've downloaded here, which I'll put the link to in the video, or this same method will work for any plant that's following this kind of sort of hierarchy. So you can use this same method on a different asset, should you wish, whilst following along. So file, oh, actually, yeah, let's open the asset first. So if I import the asset into Max, open. First things first, I will change this to default shading so we can see the asset. I'll convert this to an editor poly. Select my stem, and this needs to be set up. So you want to come up here and go to Effect Pivot Only. This to 0, and it needs to be pointing up in the Y, so -90. You'll see that red arrow there flick up. And then if I go back into bounding box, this is kind of what pivot paint is going to do. It's going to change all the pivots on all of these, so these boxes will be facing the ways that they should be, following their edge bounds, I believe it is, or which then I believe that works with how the pivot panel applies the various vector information. So this done, I now want to open Pivot Painter. So if I traditionally, well, this is always just going to be about engine version. So wherever your engine's stored, usually it's just program files by default, I believe, in Epic Games. This will also be in much previous versions. I forget when Pivot Painter was introduced, but unless you're using like a really early version of Unreal, you'll have access to this script. So then engine, extras, 3ds Max scripts, and then you just want to drag Pivot Painter 2.0 into your viewport. And then if I come down here into Prep Tools, and I want to click on the Manage option, these are basically the tools that you can use in Max, I believe, to set this up, but I've already done this in Maya, so it's kind of organized for me. But again, if you're a Max user, you'll probably find it much easier than Max. So next up, I want to select all of my leaves. So yeah, come down to the bottom, all the way up, not the stem. And then I want to click Add, and that creates a new selection set for all of those leaves. Obviously, you can have multiple selection sets, and then these would then be attached to the branch. So click Update, new set. When it's attached to the branch, that basically happens off of this here. So I want to come to Mesh, pick Mesh, I want to pick my stem. And now it's going to use that selection set, and it's going to create new pivots based off of this stem here. So if I create new pivots, and then if I go to bounding box, you see that they're all like pointing in their correct locations now. And if I come down, and so if you come into Effect Pivot Only and select, you'll see that all the pivots are now pointing in the correct locations. Now this can get somewhat more complicated with much more complicated geometry. Like you might end up with a leaf getting attached to its pivot to another branch, which is why it's really important that things are sort of listed under their hierarchy, so they can't pull to a different location or a different pivot. Anyway, that's more for trees and other more complicated things. But yeah, for a simple plant, this is fine and very easy. So with that all done, I now select my stem. Process the selected object hierarchy, which I'm going to save just to the desktop and into money plant. Select folder, and then basically what that would have done is if I go down into my money plant, I now have these pivot painter textures, which can now be used in Unreal. So next, I want to export this asset to take back into Maya and transfer the UVs to the other LODs. So this is the desktop. All the settings appear fine. Open Maya back up. I'll delete this now and re-import or just drag in the original asset. Mesh, combine, delete the history. Back up to the top of the chain. Name it. There's also a normals issue that I seem to sort of develop in 3ds Max, but that's easy to fix. So if I just go set to face, soften edge, and now my normals are fine. I'll assign the money plant sub back to the asset, delete the history, so that's all clean. Now, okay, so close this so you can see what I'm doing. I'll just open it all up. So with the asset selected, if I go into UV set editor and open the UV editor, you'll see here we have just the megascans atlas, and now in UV channel 2 it's a pivot painter, so it's got all the pivot information or pivot UVs for each leaf, which is then using the vector displacement and the I forget the name of the other texture, but yeah, the other texture to drive this so that it will move correctly and blow, or you can have a physical interaction with the player as well, sort of driven off of the pivots. And then, so if I keep it in UV channel 2, and then with my LODs, they have just the light baking, which I never use anyway, so I'll just delete this and add a new UV set on each of these, which I will then apply the pivot painter UVs to. So with the pivot painter asset selected and then the LOD selected, I go to mesh, transfer attributes. You want vertex position off and normal off. UV sets current, color sets so just set to off. Sample space always do global, and yeah, that's everything you can see there. Closest point as well. And if I click apply and delete the history, come into the LOD, and now you see it's got the correct information. So this will be moving correctly now. We move away from the object rather than artifacting and just being all over the place. And I'll do the same again on the next one. So apply. Check that there. Again, you can see that they're all just following along. Now these assets, you do sometimes end up with LODs that are quite sort of far away in terms of from the original. So you can see that there is some distance involved here, but it tends to transfer fine. But it can be worth being mindful of this, just double checking things, depending obviously on how perfect you need an asset to be. I mean, these are LODs, so you're not really going to notice, but without any information there, you will definitely see a big sort of issue when things are blowing a lot. Then for the billboard, now this gets a bit more interesting in the sense that, so if I transfer to this, click apply, it's only, as you can tell, it's not really going to be able to do much because it's a billboard. So what I find the best thing to do is your pivot information, as it were. It's your pivot up here in the top left corner, and it's always this one. This is your trunk, your stem. So this is the one that's going to control the main movement of your object. So there's two options. You could create a material LOD where you just have it so that your last LOD, as it were, you could have a material LOD on that. So it was just I don't know what you do anyway, in the sense that it's a billboard, so it's using a different texture. And then you can have wind settings 2, 3, and 4 just set to 0, so they're not going to use them at all, and it's just going to blow in accordance with the wind. That's probably your most logical way of doing this, to be honest. You can also just move your pivots so that they're just hanging right up in the top left corner. Is also another option. If this is your better option if you're using, say, actually no, I can't think of a user case scenario really, but yeah, that is another option anyway. But yeah, to do a material LOD is probably the best way, and just turn off your win settings, and you don't even need to worry about that issue, as it were. So with that all complete, I then just go into my level of detail, LOD, and I can now export this underscore money plant A01. I just call this static, but yeah, I mean, it depends what name hierarchy you're using. A lot of people use SM static mesh, or yeah, whatever works for you. And then yeah, export selection. Okay, so in regards to setting this up in Unreal, I'm not going to go over material creation or anything like that, but I'll just demonstrate the asset working. So I'm going to drag those into my textures, the pivot painter, stem, and the vector displacement, pivot position rather, yeah, vector textures. I'll go into Unreal, and in my money plant textures, I'm going to want to import those. So I'll just copy and paste. I'll import all the textures which I've set up for use for this asset. Save. I'll just quickly set this to masks. And this to masks also. So this should just be HDR, or it's usually, it shouldn't change any of this. SIGB should be off. This should be set to filter nearest. Everything else just leave as is. Come all the way down to the bottom. This should be set to no map maps, and this should be set to world, which sometimes it does change. And then this wants to be set to vector displacement. SIGB should be switched off. Again, this should be set to nearest. And again, these sometimes change as well, but yeah, no map maps, world. Save. I'm going to just use my own material. So if I just duplicate one that I've already got here, and I'll duplicate the billboard as well, and I'll drag these down into my money plant, and let's call this money plant A01, and call this money plant A bill. And then I want to put my textures in. Now I'm just using the megascans. I believe it ships with these trees, so you can have like autumn and other various cool funky things and seasons and stuff. So I'll drag my textures in. So I'll be using diffuse, normal, my RTO, which is, I'm set up mine so it's roughness, translucency, and ambient occlusion, but I believe it's different by default. But yeah, it's just set up the way I'm using textures. I also have some flattening features and some other things which I've added, which I may do a tutorial on as well, should be of interest to people. But for now, I'm mainly just wanting to cover this here. So yeah, you want to bring the pivot painter, the stem, and then your vector displace, and then your wind settings, or down here. So let's save that, and then come into billboard, and I'll do the same again. Oh, tell a light, my billboard. This copy doesn't actually have anything, so what I'm going to do is I will delete that one, and I will duplicate this one, and I will call this a bill. And then this one, I shall add. Oh, it's already got them, of course, it's stupid. And again, like I said before, so what you can do here is you just want to set this to off. And all of these should be off anyway because it's not going to be using them due to the hierarchy. Only had, I believe, 2 levels on it, the stem and then the leaves. But for trees, you often end up coming down. These go a lot further, or yeah, can go further. So with that complete, so yeah, I want to import the money plant assets. So add import files, saved into here. This should all be fine for now. Fix this, and then yeah, material billboard. Next, just to test it, come up here into foliage. And delete both of these as well now. Drag this up in here. Save as foliage type. I tend to put this to movable and turn off cast static shadow and turn on distance for the lighting. Just fun. That's stuff I'm doing. Everything else will be fine as is for this. Turn this on. I'll increase this to 600 so we can see more of them. Filter, turn static mesh so I can paint it onto the mesh. Okay, yeah, well, I haven't put my billboard textures on, so that's what's happened there. So, okay, if I come down to my, save this, billboard textures, actually not been applied. So, yeah, I'm going to come in here, my billboard texture in, do normal, RTO, save that. And you can see there, swaying in the wind. Billboard's probably jumping a bit quicker actually, so if I come down here and leave the odd one, let's put it to 0.5 to put that to 0.2. We should put that to something like 0.75. Save. And now I'll come into select. And again, like I said before, I'm just using the megascans, the asset they have their tree. So if I use the BP foliage actor, I can like crank the wind strength up. I don't know if you, depending on how they're using this, their tree shader bit is pretty good. Like it gives some pretty good results and movements and things. It's just better than what I had before. And again, it's I have to set up so it's sort of somewhat interactive. Although actually, I'm not really going to see it with that, so I'll put that down. So kind of like what position these things. Again, these are things I make up with later. It should be of interest to people, and just ways you can add flattening to things and other things. I mean, I've sort of purchased an asset off the Unreal Marketplace using UIPF, which I've then sort of heavily modified and adapted. But there are other solutions out there that are quite cheap and free and available actually on the marketplace. Which, again, just ask any questions in the comments below, and I can point you in directions of things or do more tutorials on this should it be of interest. But yeah, hopefully this will benefit some of you, answer some questions, and enjoy. Thank you. Goodbye.